Welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. Today we're going to be doing a free motion quilting video tutorial. We're going to be using a stencil to learn the new design. So we're going to be using Splash of Love. This is manufactured by Line Stencil. I really like theirs because it is a full line. So this is made essentially of a screen printing material like my t-shirt. There was a triangle that someone pushed paint through, a mesh screen. And in this case, we're going to be pushing a chalk powder through this screen to give us a nice full line to follow. And you can use this with any stencil that you have, but I prefer it with these because a lot of those plastic ones, obviously the plastic has to stay in place, so there's a lot of dots and dashes, and sometimes you can get off and not quite know where you're supposed to go next. So this is very helpful in order to get that nice, good path of where you're going to go. So this is a nice little heart design. Hearts are essentially feather primer. So if you're trying to get the feather shape down, this is a good one to practice with because essentially a feather is just half of a heart. So we're gonna get working on that. There's also a couple little feather bumps in there, and don't be intimidated because I tried to do feathers freehand and could never do it. But you pop a stencil on there and I can do them perfect every time. I don't know what it is. I think I just need that line to follow. I can't get it in my brain just yet to be able to just do it with nothing out of thin air. But if I have one of these, and I can make it happen. Also, Meander's quilting gloves are great. They've got little grippies on the fingertips. You can tell mine are nice and well loved. And they are great for grabbing hold of fabric because this is kind of hard on your body because you are moving an entire quilt around. So it can be hard on your wrist strain, your hand strain, and then your back and shoulder. But if you've got these, it's easier to do it. And so then the body doesn't get as sore when you're working with it. I always like to practice with solid half yards of fabric too. That way I can see everything really well and get the design down before I use it on the real deal. And today I'm using the Ultimate White Quilt Pounce. This is removable by your iron, so it'll go away when you heat it up. And it's really great because the lines are there and then they're gone. And you cannot iron away the pink and the blue that we also stock with this that you have to brush or wash off, but that also comes off pretty easily. But I want to show you guys this because it's pretty slick. All right, so when you first get your Pounce Pad, you're going to take off this top. It just pops off like a bank stopper from when you were a kid. And then you're going to fill that up to the brim with the chalk powder that comes with it. And you're going to bang it with the plastic piece on the back hard against your table 50 times. Whenever people can't get this to work, it's because they haven't primed it properly and haven't banged enough. So you really want to beat it, you know, like this. All right, so once you've done that 50 times, if you're filling it for the first time, you're gonna repeat that process and do it a second 50 times. And when you turn it out, you should see that chalk has fully filled up this pad here. And if it's a color one, you're gonna see it, the color will have saturated it completely. And if you're just refilling it, you can just do it the 50 times and you're good to go. All right, so I've got some chalk in a few places here. All right, so this stencil looks more challenging than it actually is. We're gonna break it down today. So essentially you're gonna wanna go from point to point. So we're gonna kind of start and we're gonna pop around to the point and we're gonna pause for a second, and then we're gonna do a curve and pause at the point and curve and pause at the point. The reason why you wanna pause at the point is because that gives you a good chance to pause, take a look around, see if you need to move your hands before you go to the next one, because if you have to stop mid-curve, you are going to have a much harder time getting that to look nice and smooth than if you take a pause here and see, okay, I can make it to this one really easily, but okay, so I got to this part and I've got to travel all the way around to here, maybe I need to move my hands before I do that. And then it'll just look a lot better and you'll have much better results when it's all said and done. All right, there's also these registration marks on the stencil. We're going to show you how to use those to get your design nice and straight. All right, so I'm just using this half yard of fabric, solid fabric. So I'm just going to line it up with the edges. You would line it up with your quilt block if you were using it at home. And I'm just kind of keeping it nice and straight and keeping everything going straight up and down that way. All right, so I just kind of hold everything in place with my fingers. And then you want to swipe that Pounce Pad. It is really easy to want to pounce it because it is called a Pounce Pad, but that will not get the fabric across. It'll just make a big mess. You really want to slide that across. Occasionally I'll do 2 swipes if I feel like it may need a little extra. And before I pull everything up, I want to sort of pull back and see how everything transferred. And because now is a really good time. You can see it really clearly down here, but when I look at it up here and I just kind of peel it back, I can see that I can see it, but it could be a lot darker. So I'm going to give it another bang, and then I'm just going to add a little bit over here. And you just always want to make sure you're anchoring this down with a hand before you're swiping. And that is looking a little bit better. We'll get a little bit more here yet. There we go. That looks a lot better. All right, so I've got a little bit of double vision here where the stencil shifted a little bit on me. No big deal, just pick which line to follow because the lines are all gonna go away and nobody will know when it's all said and done. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and peel that off. And then you can see right here, we have our little target, and that is gonna match up with the target on the bottom of the stencil. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna put our finger on that target and bring it down until it meets. And then if we look on this side, you can see that the line picks up right where it ends off. So that makes it really nice. They really thought very hard when they put these together so that you would end up with a nice continuous design. So once I've got that all lined up, give it a couple more bangs. We're gonna give it a little swipe. Again, we'll give a little peel back, see how that looks, pretty good. All right, we are good. We are ready to go with our first pass. Now, a lot of times people ask, you know, how should I mark this? And you should mark only one pass at a time because this chalk is meant to be there long enough for you to quilt it and then it goes away. So in the process of quilting and manipulating the quilt to get it under your sewing machine, you are going to just get the chalk going away. And that's the way it's supposed to be. But if you go and mark your entire quilt top, then you're just gonna have to redo that work a lot because it's gonna be falling off by the time you get to it. All right, so typically I quilt with whatever will fit in between my hands, space like this. But so you guys can see on the side camera, I always put one hand down so you can get a little bit better view of what's going on. But you should quilt like this, and whatever fits in between your hands underneath your throw plate, that's the only thing that you can do before you have to stop, pause, and move your hands. So I'm being very careful to drape this so that the marked side is up and not scraping against my t-shirt because that's gonna pull all the chalk off, and we don't want that. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and put that down, and I'm gonna go ahead and put my needle down and back up again. And what that does is it grabs the bobbin thread from beneath. So you wanna have a little bit of tail on your bobbin thread, and what you're gonna do is you're going to put your needle down and up again at the start of your quilting. So what that does is it grabs your bobbin thread, so that way you can grab a hold of that top thread and it pops right up through the top. And that way you've got all your threads. When you start right on the top of your quilt, you won't get a nasty thread nest underneath, and which can lead to tension problems, and it just looks ugly. All right, so I put my needle right back down right where I started, and I always move my sewing speed to the middle because that helps me control my speed a little bit better because you are controlling your own stitch length here, and it is a combination of how fast you're moving the quilt to how fast you're moving your machine. The other thing you want to do is you want to lower your feed dogs if your machine will do that. If it won't, just turn your stitch length down as low as it can possibly go, 0 or 0.2, and that'll work as well. All right, so I'm starting right here. So I'm going to stitch into here and I'm going to pause at that point, and then I'm going to come around and pause at the next point, come around and pause, and keep doing that until I start to get the hang and feel for this design, and then we will start going a little bit faster. Stitch in place a couple times first, and then just try to make it really nice and smooth as you're going over those curves. All right, so I'm gonna stop. I'm liking my stitch length. It's going pretty good. I've got a good flow, but again, it's always good to work on a practice piece so that way you can really get that down before you go to the real deal. All right, so now I'm gonna go around that curve. And if you kind of get going a little bit and stitch in place at those points, that'll help avoid a giant stitch at the beginning of it. All right, so I'm gonna pause. You don't have to always completely stop. You can always just kind of do a couple stitches in place and kind of refigure where you're going next. All right, so now is a really good time to pause. You can see my hand is way over here, like really turned out, and then I've got my hand down here so you guys can see on that side camera, and I just don't have good control anymore. That last curve was not so great. So it's time to stop and reposition my hands. I'm gonna get my hand completely spread out here since we've now moved in a little bit. And I'm gonna keep this one here, but again, you would wanna hold it right here if you were doing it at home. All right, so I'm gonna kind of sneak peek. Where am I going next? Because I've gotta go backwards. It's a little bit harder to see. And I can see I'm gonna be going around a heart. You can see my hands are really stretched out again, so it is definitely time to reposition that. And again, when you're repositioning, you want to lift your hand up and move it down, because if you drag it across your fabric, you are going to displace that chalk and then you won't have your lines to follow. That's really all it is. You're just going over some swoops and they happen to form hearts and a few little feathers here. And as long as you are making sure to stop and regroup at those points, see if you need to reposition your hands. And then just start, do a couple stitches in place, get your speed where you want it. And if you ever get off, no big deal, because those lines are going to go away. You just kind of want to follow the idea of that line. So I've quilted that first pass, and we definitely can still see some chalk lines here, but that's okay because those are going to go away. And as long as you follow the idea of the curve, it's not a big deal if you didn't stick right on it. And I have to tell you guys that I usually absolutely hate my quilting right after I finished it, because you have been like as close to it as anybody ever will be. You know every single stitch that was out of place or was too long or too short. And when you look at it a couple of weeks later, you're going to love it, because you know you won't have had that memory of, oh, I got super off at this one place when I should have changed my hand position before I did. So that will help a lot. There's just some time. And then also if you are using, and you know, matching thread, if I had a nice salmon thread instead of the white so you guys could see it better, then it would just blend and create this beautiful, lovely heart and feather texture. All right, so right quick before we go, I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to remove this chalk and also how to line this up. So let's line it up first. All right, so I can see this target really easily, but I'm gonna go ahead and remark that so that way you guys can see it pretty well on camera as well. All right, so now you can see that target pretty well at home as well. So what you're gonna do now is we're gonna use our targets on the side to line it up. So we're just going to slide it. I put my fingertip right in the center, slide it over right on top. And then what you want to do is you just kind of want to peek and make sure that you're not covering up the lines too much. Like this one maybe needs to come up a smidge. So that way we're not having those bits and bobbles get into each other and run into each other. And if you do have it where like a line is overlapping, maybe you got off somewhere, just adjust as you're going so you don't end up with overlapping lines in the end. All right, so I'm pretty happy with the position of this now. So I'm gonna go ahead and do my swipes. All right, let's do our checks, see how that transferred, pretty good. Check the side, also pretty good. All right, so now we've done that, and then you're just gonna line up your targets at the bottom with the top again, just like we did on this side, and you are good to go. All right, I'm going to do that a little bit off camera, and then I'm gonna come and show you guys how easily this just goes away. It is fabulous. Got it zoomed in a little so you can see the chalk go away, but isn't this cute how it really just fits in there absolutely perfectly. If we've got it just meeting and kissing, and it really makes a fabulous all over pattern. And it is pretty simple because again, we are just doing a swirl and stopping, and then another loop, soft loop and stopping. And as long as you try to make sure that you do not have to stop in the middle of any of these loops, then you can just focus on making soft curves and pointy points. And those really is all that makes up any quilting design, is soft curves and pointy points. So you just are doing them in different orders in order to make this happen. All right, so we can see I've got some lines here. We're gonna make those go away with the iron here. And again, you can only do that with the ultimate white, any of the regular white or the, which we don't carry, and the blue and the pink, you need to brush or wash off or you will heat set the color and you don't want to do that. All right, so you can see a lot of the chalk has already come off as I've worked, as I said it would. So that's why I'm gonna mark one bit at a time, but we still have bits left over. So we're just gonna go over that with the iron. You're just gonna spend a little bit of time on it and it'll go away. And when it does get kind of pushed in, when you did a good job of staying on those lines, you do have to spend a little bit more time on it to get it out from in those crevices of where the seams are. But you can already see how this is going away pretty well. The tip of the iron. All right, so you can see this is pretty slick. We've got almost really nothing is left of that, and it doesn't leave a mark, which is fabulous. It just goes away and it stays away, which is just the best thing you can ask for from a quilt marking tool to help you create this really fun design. And the idea of it is that over time, you don't need to use the stencil anymore. You use it to sort of develop your muscle memory, and then you go from there. And if things get like, you know, right here where I was, I should have moved my hands a little earlier. You know what, don't worry about it, because if you're using matching thread and this is one tiny little screw up in a whole big quilt, no one's gonna zero in on that. And if they do, they're not your friend. They're the quilt police, and you don't need that in your life. Again, this stencil is called Splash of Love, and we all could use a little bit more of love in our lives right now. So this is a good one for right now in any quilt, so just make you happy if you get this all over one of your quilt designs. So everything you need to do this is available on our website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. We make it easy so you can get this, and we've got tons of other stencil video tutorials so you can take a look at them, get a real good look and preview of what those designs might look like on your quilts, and then just, you know, pull up a bunch of fat quarter sandwiches and have some fun and really improve your quilting on your home sewing machine. Now I did this on my even tiny, my beginner model. It's like the lowest I would consider recommending anybody get if they're going to be serious about quilting. And because my nice one that I normally do my free motion quilting on went down right before, you know, the world got a little crazy, and I haven't had it in to be serviced yet. And so, you know, you can do this on a beginner level sewing machine. It's not as easy, but you can totally do it even if you have a small throat space, depending on the size of your quilt. So give it a go, have some fun, finish some of those quilts you've been sewing up during quarantine, and until next time, happy quilting.